Good morning. Now, this isn't just a casual Sunday. I tore a tendon, and so I have to wear this brace, and I don't have any clothes to go with it. This morning's people's testimony is from the play and movie, You Can't Take It With You. This is by a gentleman by the name of Moss Hart. Was an American playwright. The play itself in 1937 won a Pulitzer Prize for drama, and in 1938 the movie won the Academy Award for Best Picture and Best Directory. And Moss Hart also did many other works that you may be familiar with, one being The Man Who Came to Dinner. Maybe it'd stop you trying to be so desperate about making more money than you can ever use. You can't take it with you, Mr. Kirby. So what good is it? As near as I can see, the only thing you can take with you is the love of your friends. Our reading from the tradition this morning is Ecclesiastes, the first chapter, the first through the 18th verse. I kind of enjoyed reading this. I like words, and the words that are used here bring out some emotions. Depending on which expert you read about, the teacher that is referred to here could be King Solomon. These are the words of the teacher, King David's son, who ruled in Jerusalem. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher, completely meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. The sun rises and the sun sets, then scurries around to rise again. Picture the sun scurrying across the sky. The wind blows south, then turns north. Around and around it goes, blowing in circles. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. Then the water returns again to the rivers and flows out again into the sea. Everything is wearisome beyond description. No matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we are not content. The word of the Lord.
Thank you, Walter. You're welcome. I am debating with myself about whether or not I should point out a really nerdy thing that's just come up. What do you think? Should I?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. So the biggest reason I hear that this couldn't have been Solomon is because there are coins mentioned in this book. And coins have not always existed. They certainly weren't around during the time of Solomon. And yet, our writer refers to himself as the son of David, which I suppose you could, any king in that dynasty could probably say that, you know, I'm part of this dynasty, I am the son of David. At the very least, he wants us to think of him as a Solomon-type figure, though, right? And Solomon, for those of you who, haven't heard the tale, was supposed to be the wisest man who ever lived. So whenever you have somebody saying, listen, I'm Solomon, or I'm like Solomon, you have them saying, I'm going to tell you the smartest smart stuff you've ever heard. Our writer refers to himself as Qoheleth. I like to call him Q, because Qoheleth is hard for me to say. So I'm going to keep calling him Q. Not to confuse him with another Q who often comes up in Bible stuff, Not the Q from the New Testament. Different guy. Qoheleth means like assembler. It could mean like somebody who put a lot of material together. Could be somebody who pulls a lot of people together. This is all to say, our translators don't know how to translate Q either. He could be teacher, could be preacher, probably not a pastor. Probably not King Solomon. All right, so we're starting off with some complication and nuance here. Stuff that I wasn't going to start off with, but, you know, it felt right, so I'm rolling with it. Growing up, I was told that the Bibles are basic instructions before leaving Earth. Now, that's quite clever because it has the first letter of each blah, blah, blah. It's an acronym, right? B-I-B-L-E. Basic instructions before leaving Earth. That's how you know it's true, because it's easy to remember. Yeah. But the more I've studied the Bible, the more complicated it's become. The less basic it's become. And often there are instructions and criticism of those instructions. Every teacher has their own perspective. Every would-be Solomon has wisdom that you shouldn't question. And then it gets questioned by other folks. One of the areas that you could see this the most clearly, if you put yourself in your previous sermon time machine, or if you remember reading this in the Gospels, every single time Jesus says, "You've heard it said, but I say." He's pointing out something from his tradition, and he's putting his own spin on it. You've heard it said, "Don't murder." I'm telling you, it's got to go deeper than that. Don't kill people with your words. Don't kill people with your heart. Right? So, that has been a very beautiful but frustrating thing as I've grown in my Bible study, because that means everything kind of requires a depth of research beyond what I can just see on the top of the text. And that means that I can't put it all in a blender and make it agree with itself. Now, Ecclesiastes is one of these books that very, very clearly does this disagreeing work. Q struggles with existentialism. He struggles with meaning here. Pointless, pointless. Everything is pointless, he says. Chasing after the wind. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow. What's the point? And he says, you know what? To discover what the point is to all of this, I did some experimenting. I experimented with wisdom, and I experimented with foolishness. Every time I use the word wisdom, I want you to keep in mind, this is the way you live to have like a good life, if possible. This is when you do the right stuff. Importantly, this is smart. We attach all of this extra meaning to the word wise when really he's saying this is the smart way to live, right? And when he says foolish, this word we rarely use, he means like the opposite of wise, but he also means like stupid. It's just stupid. Sometimes we use these words in our Bibles that kind of just take the punch out of it. This has punchiness to it. Now, I'm going to say things in the next few minutes that you're likely to agree with the author on, And I'm going to say some things that you're likely to disagree with the author on. So here's my invitation. As I go through and talk about his experiments and what he discovers, I'd like you to look at that Post-it pad in front of you and consider how you would respond to Q. All right? If he hits on something and you're like, actually, Q, you need to get off your high horse and see that this actually really matters. That is meaningful. That you should care about that. Write it down. Write down your response. And at the end of this message, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share those, okay? If you have written down on your Post-it note and you're ready for it to go up on the board, raise your hand. Any point in the sermon, okay? I want to see Steve doing laps around here. Steve's going to come up, he's going to collect those, and he's going to put them up here. All right, so Q starts off with his experimenting by talking about wisdom. I experimented with wisdom. And you know, I was pretty good at wisdom. I'm pretty smart. I did the things that I was supposed to do. And you know what I found out? In the end, you die. Huh? Well, he talks about in the end you die. That's his biggest complaint about being wise. You share the same fate as stupid people. Also, if wisdom is such a great way to live, then why doesn't it always work out for everybody? You see Deuteronomy and Proverbs, who he's responding to, they have a perspective that if you are wise, you live a good life, you get blessings for it. You get nice stuff. You're surrounded with people who care about you. You have a nice house. You're well respected. You live a long life. And you're healthy too. Q says, bunk. That's not the way it goes for everybody. In fact, it all seems rather random and arbitrary. And he's actually mad at God about this. This is a great injustice under the sun, he says. This is part of why he cares that the wise and the foolish share the same fate. Because you would think after a while the balance on the scale always gets corrected. But it often doesn't. There once was a man. He was just a normal, everyday dude. And he was a pauper. He had very little going for him. But you know what? He was smart. And when another force, an enemy nation, was coming against the doors of his town, through his wisdom, the people were saved. But he was forgotten. Nobody remembers his name. This is a great evil under the sun, that even the wise are forgotten. Another evil to go along with wisdom. Often we are ruled not by princes who know what they're doing, which in the ancient world you assume a prince or a king, they're smart. They don't have this position for no reason, and they're educated. In fact, they spend all of their years of formation learning. They don't have to take care of farm fields. They don't have to go into military service, although some of them do. They can learn stuff. And what he found is some princes are stupid. Some kings don't know what they're doing. And there's many a slave who is smart and does know what they're doing. But you know what? They're still a slave. They still don't have say-so over their own lives because they belong to somebody else. This is a great unfairness and evil under the sun. So we've got wisdom. It's pointless. What's the point? What's the point? So then he experiments, by the way, if you're like, I've got some points on why wisdom matters, write them down on your Post-it, and we'll put them up here. So then he experiments with foolishness. And some of foolishness is, I'll say, like siblings. Madness, insanity. He's like, I lived a crazy life. I experimented with a crazy way to live. And self-indulgence. Self-indulgence. Whatever my eyes wanted, I granted them. I partied hard. I did all the feasting. And I drank, and drank, and drank. Don't think that I became stupid because I drank so much. No, of course not. I was a drunk person who was able to be, still sober-minded. He actually says this, and I'm, Are you sure about that? You sound like a lot of people I've known who think that they still got it all together when they've drank way too much. I had lots and lots of sex, he says. I gathered for myself many concubines. Concubines are people, women, that he's allowed to have sex with, but they're not his wives. The ancient world was messy. Not always awesome for women. So pleasure seeking. You know what he found out? It makes you dumb. It makes you stupid after a while if that's the only way you live. Okay, so one of the cousins to self-indulgence, a particular type of self-indulgence he goes to next is greed. He gathered for himself many, many things. And you know what he found out? Just as the sea is never full, just as the eyes never get enough of seeing, and just as the ears never get enough of hearing, those with too much never have enough. So what's the point? He actually thinks that this is not just an evil to be lamented, but this is an ailment to be pitied in his perspective. He finds it really sad that the greedy are never fulfilled. I don't know if I felt that, but he's felt that. Maybe there's something there. All right, so he was greedy. He tried that out. It's pointless. Those with the most toys still die. So then he tried something else. He tried, I'm going to see if this fits here. Building projects. I have the worst handwriting, guys. Hope you don't mind. I could, yeah. So building projects. In the ancient world, how do you get to be remembered? Right? Part of his great issue is that everything fades. It all goes away. So what if you built something that outlasts yourself? So he says he built many things. Now I feel like even if he was King Solomon, this must be a little bit disingenuous. We know how this works with rulers in the ancient world. They're not getting out there slapping mortar on stuff. No, they have ideas and they're working with folks. Hey, you know what? I have this idea. What if we built a giant tomb for me? Let's start building it now and make sure that it's way bigger than my dad's, right? What do we remember of those from before the time of this writing? Well, we've got the pyramids, right? The pyramids which were ancient before this book was written. You've got the other noted 7 wonders of the world, which would have been written down near the time of this book, when this book was written down. When you had the Greeks doing a lot more traveling around the Mediterranean. You know, the big temple to Zeus, the hanging gardens of Babylon. So he has many houses built for himself. And he builds gardens. And he builds parks and, vineyards. And you know what he finds out? It doesn't matter. He's still going to die one day. So these building projects, they don't matter. We still build things for this reason, don't we? Which leads us to hard work. Our translators often like to use this word toil, and I just love the way toil sounds, so I'm gonna use this. But if you've never heard this word before, because it is kind of an old-timey word, toil means hard work. What about toil? Well, he says he actually really enjoys toil. You know, he likes hard work. He's not scared of a bit of hard work. Put him out there. Let him do his thing. But in the end, you know what the problem with hard work is? There are some who've worked so hard for what they have, endlessly, and they still don't have enough. This is different than those who are just greedy. This is those who are just trying to carve out a life for themselves. And there are those who've worked so hard because they are greedy, and they never get a chance to enjoy what they have earned. And he thinks that's a great evil under the sun. You do have enough, and you never get to enjoy it. But ultimately, his biggest problem with toil is that one day you die, and you know who gets the fruit of your toil? Other people. It may be a stranger who steals it from you. Most likely, it's going to be your kids or your grandkids. And you know what? You go long enough down this lineage, and eventually you're going to get a stupid person who gets your stuff. And they're going to squander it. So toil must not be the way to a life that has meaning. Even toil, as much as he loves it, is pointless. Because you can't control how your descendants are going to use it. Which brings us to another thing. And I'm wondering if this is going to get any kind of a response out of you all. Legacy. Legacy, what we leave behind. Not to be confused with building projects. What we pass on to those who come after us. Does legacy matter? I disagree with our writer. I think legacy does matter. I think it does. But he doesn't find that to be a key to a meaningful life. Are you starting to get a sense of his character here? He's a little self-involved. He's a little egocentric. In a way that is kind of unique for our writings in Scripture, which are usually communally focused. They're almost always concerned about how the community is doing. But he is worried that he's going to pass on his stuff to people who are going to use and abuse it and misuse it. So legacy, not the way to a meaningful life, he says. If you disagree, write it down, and then raise your hand and let Steve collect it. We must be reaching the end, right? Because Giuseppe, you've been going on and on. Yes. What about justice? And by this, I mean working for the improvement of other people's lives. I mean equity. Well, he sees great injustices in the world, and some of them he thinks are God's fault, and some of them he very clearly sees as the fault of people. Like when you get a stupid person in power, and then oppression happens, and it's all very awful, he says. He has some empathy, it seems, for those who are not receiving justice. But he also says, you know, but if you think about it, there's a poster over there. If you think about it, you know, you've got like your manager, and then you've got like the manager above them, and then you've got like the manager above them. So it goes all the way up into the king, right? And then the king's like accountable to God. So oppression is just the way of the universe. Everybody's kind of being oppressed, and it's kind of necessary, he says, as an educated person who's telling us that he is the king and the wisest guy who ever lived and had enough resources that he could do this experimenting and get whatever his eyes want. Injustice is just the way things have to be, he says, because you need a king for a plowed field. How else are we supposed to be provided for if we don't have these oppressive systems in place? This one is the most sad to me, personally. I mean, the legacy one is also very sad. I don't think that they're disconnected. I think they do reveal his self-centeredness. But imagine thinking that justice is pointless because you can't imagine a world or a future where things become more fair or could be more equitable. He owns people as slaves while also recognizing that many a slave is smart and could actually do a better job of running the kingdom than our kings. But he lacks the imagination to consider a better world. He wrestles with Deuteronomy. He wrestles with Proverbs, but you know what he's not wrestling with? The works of the prophets. The prophets in the Hebrew Bible, many of which were written before this book was written, who challenge the people and their rulers to build a better world. Like Isaiah, which tells us we could have a world where swords can be turned into plowshares. Now, this is all rather bleak and melancholy. And you may be wondering if I'm just going to leave you hanging like this on such a sour note. I have no such plans, friends. I am wondering if you're going to leave yourselves hanging on a sour note, though, because that's why I passed these Post-it notes out. I'm going to share hopeful stuff next week. But this is where I want to leave us as far as our writer's concerns. And I want to see what you have to say. And I find a certain poetry in this, because our writer is wrestling, Q is wrestling with Proverbs and Deuteronomy, and we are wrestling with Ecclesiastes. We're wrestling with his words. So let's see what you all have to contribute to this conversation. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. I wasn't expecting this. Holy cannoli. And some of this I hate to say I can't read. I disagree that God is false. We as humans have responsibility for ourselves, like work for our... Okay. Huh? Work for our living. And living needs... Oh, we need one another. God cares for everything and for you. I wonder if that's going to come up next week.